What's up, YouTube, and welcome to this week's rendition of Gods Unchained Market Watch. I'm your host, Juju, and today we're going to go over all of the most notable market movements that have happened over the Gods Unchained economy this week. So, hope everyone's having a great day. Hope everyone had a great weekend. Super Bowl, whether you're a Bengals fan, sorry Bengals fans, or a Rams fan, yay Rams fans, or if you had a great Valentine's Day. I know I did. Your boy had plans. Let's go. Anyways, but yeah, that's also part of the reason why we're doing this on a Tuesday. We usually do market watches on Mondays, but because of how eventful the weekend was, I decided to move it back. Scheduling, all that good stuff. You know the drill. But yeah, as far as the market goes, for the most part, I think everything was relatively quiet this week. We did see a little market movements that have happened, some buyouts here and there, but for the most part, everything has really just taken this consolidation phase. Everything is slowed down. I feel like the meta game is finally settling into being solved, right? So once a game starts getting solved, it's usually the tech cards that start popping up out of nowhere, and you'll see that here for the most part. Not really, just like very niche cards that are probably worth experimenting with, right? As you can see, if you're looking at my tabs right now, this is probably going to be the shortest market watch ever, which is super nice. I hope while doing the digging, I hope you guys get something out of these cards, because it is a pretty quality bunch. Like, you don't see a lot of random buyouts, except for one, but for the most part, these are all quality cards. So without further ado, let's just go ahead and start with our first card. Our first card is not a death card. Wow, right? So with the death metagame right now, I think with board wipe death has been relatively solved. All the price action with the whole Sleep 2.0 scare has also kind of resolved. Siren of the Grave is settling over to $30. Apocalypse Now is still at $400, which is pretty average. And then Sulfuric Rain is hovering around that 200-250 mark. Yeah, not much to say there with board wipe death, or I mean death as a whole. There hasn't been much market movement, which is why we're starting off with Orfeo, Champion of Deception, for our Deception cards. So Orfeo is a 1-mana 1/1 backline Dudley, hidden for 1 turn. After you play a card, play this creature on the board if it's in your hand. It's free tempo, essentially. One thing that I really want to highlight about Deception is I don't think it gets a lot of credit within the metagame right now. A lot of people are talking about board wipe death, and of course War is going to be strong. Nature is probably most common, and Tempo Mage has been the hot thing. But really, Deception is in a very good spot. Hidden Rush Deception in particular is very good. Hidden is a very hard mechanic to deal with unless you have either random targeting spells or AoE spells. So Nature does a really good job working with Deception, and then Magic also does work. War also has those opportunities with Valka's Discovery and Auric Rush. So those are two answers for Orfeo in particular, or anything with Hidden. But for the most part, I think I think Hidden is a very strong thing. Outside of those very niche cards, it's very easy to get a hidden minion to attack, which is why Shadewalker, Switch Duelist, Orfeo, Shadow of Lethanon are very strong cards in this metagame right now. As long as you dodge the AoE that's happening, but I mean you can. A lot of lists are starting to forego AoE options because the metagame has evolved into something so fast, right? So, but yeah, Orfeo is a great card. You see a spike here. It's about $80, or yeah, 80. It went from like 90 to 118, so it's like a $25 increase, right? Yeah, that's right. Yeah, $25. Cheapest you can buy it is at 117 right now. Not much to say here. It's a solid card. Ooh, I think I'm missing one more card. Hold on. Let me just make sure this is right. Yeah, I don't know why I did that. Our next card for Deception is Satyr Hypnotist. It's your 2 mana 2/2. At the end of your turn, a random enemy creature goes to sleep. We did see a buyout happen on the day before Valentine's Day. 492 all the way up to $5 right now. Oh, it's at 496. So it's very much consolidated back down to its normal price. What I like about the card, it can create some soft lock situations. If your opponent has one minion on the board at the end of your turn, it'll be able to have that creature go to sleep and possibly provide cover for your Shadewalker, Shadow of Lethenon, Switch Duelist, Jinx Blade Duelist, all that good stuff. So there's a lot of like soft lock potential there. The only problem with this card is that it's a 2/2 for 2 mana. So the stat line is not very good. Very fragile. Most 1 mana cards can deal with the 2/2, and if your opponent doesn't have a 1 mana card that deals with it, like there are just a plethora of options, removal options. Even if your opponent doesn't have a removal option, they can just rely on their god power, right? Like the mage ping, or the Orpheo's Deception god power. I'm still trying to get these god power names right, but you know the deal. Any god power that deals 1 damage can probably deal with this card in 1 or 2 turns. Cool. Oops. Now we're moving on to the light cards. So first up we have Veteran Hoplite. This is your 1 mana 2/5. Deal 4 damage to this creature. I actually really like this card. It reminds me of Injured Blade Master from old Hearthstone, which was a 3 mana 3/7. Deal 4 damage to this creature. This Veteran Hoplite, excuse me. Veteran Hoplite has a lot of synergies with Jackalope. Basically any of the heal cards in the light class, right? Synergy with CERN, synergy with High Thaumaturge, synergy with Field Medic. My favorite combo is the Jackalope. So for turn 1, for example, you open Veteran Hoplite Jackalope, you summon the Veteran Hoplite, summon the Jackalope, fully heals the Veteran Hoplite, so you end up with a 1 mana 2/5 and a 1 mana 1/1 on turn 1, and that's pretty solid. That's a solid opening in my opinion. There's also a 1 mana spell that fully heals a creature and then gives that creature +2 in light. I forgot the name, but you can also play it with this card for a crazy turn 1. Basically, you play this card turn 1, play the spell, then you end up, the spell fully heals the Hoplite, and then it gives it 2 health, right? So you end up with a 1 mana 2/7 on turn 1. And that's basically better than a Pyramid Warden without the drawback. Yeah, pretty good card in my opinion. Very solid. We do see a spike here, but it did consolidate back down to its normal level, which is fine. I've been experimenting with the card as of late, and I like it. It's a fun card. Cool. Next up, we have Healing Light. Okay, so this one is an interesting card to dissect, right? Because we get to dissect like Sanctum and Favor and all that stuff. So we're gonna try our best. Before we do that, we do see a spike, right? 26 copies were bought at an average price of 0.0003 ETH. What is that? That's like, okay, 37 cents. Jumped all the way to 89. Now it's consolidating around the 50-60 cent mark. I mean, not a crazy price differential, but yo, if you bought like 1,000 copies of these back in the day, maybe it's worth. But I mean, this volume doesn't really justify the buyout, right? Anyways, so I think this card will be an interesting thought experiment. So in Gods Unchained, the average cost of a card in the Sanctum is 13 to 17 favor. That's your minimum maximum range, right? So we can assume that 8 favor is half of 1 card, right? If I were to put 16 favor on a card, I can equate that to draw 1 card from the Sanctum. Cool. Now, in Gods Unchained, most draw 1 cards are going to be 1 mana, right? You have, I don't know, Dimension Door. I mean, the Rune of Sight is a 2 mana card, but it lets you force C2, so it's a little murky there. But most cards will be 1 mana draw card or 2 mana draw card, however you want to phrase it. So we can kind of assume that this 8 favor part of the effect is maybe worth 0.5 mana. We'll just say that safely. 0.5 to 1 mana. Cool? Cool. That means the rest of the effect has to equal 3 mana, or roughly, right? I don't want to get into like crazy numbers because that just complicates the experiment. So is this next effect worth 3 mana? I want you to decide. Fully heal each friendly creature and give them 1 health. Cool. So as much as I want to say yes or no, it's a lot harder to judge because this effect is actually kind of conditional, right? In order to get the value that you need to have damaged creatures on board. And the damage that you heal plus the health that you give needs to equal 3 mana. So, for example, if we go back to this Veteran Hoplite analogy, since we just went over that card, we played Veteran Hoplite into Jackalope turn 1, right? Your opponent summons a monster, they don't have anything to deal with the Hoplite or the Jackalope. Cool. You summon Pyramid Ward, turn 2. Okay, cool. You trade with the Hoplite favorably, hopefully, and then the Jackalope stays alive to go face. Your opponent then has to summon another minion, and then from there you can trade with the Pyramid Warden to deal with that minion, and then play, I don't know, Brilliant Dawn turn 3. So then you have a buff board of 3 minions with health, but they're damaged, right? Your opponent summons another minion for their turn 3. You trade accordingly, and then on your turn 4, you play Healing Light. That's worth it, because you're healing probably like at least 4 or 5 points, right? Because you're healing the Pyramid Warden, you're healing the buff Hoplite, and then you're giving health. That would be worth it. But there are also situations with this card that will definitely not be worth it, right? Imagine a top decking situation where you and your opponent are just not like... You guys are in a top deck war, right? So whoever plays the card and whatever sticks basically wins. Your top deck situation, you draw this card. You have nothing on board. You're going to play this card for 8 favor. For 4 mana. I don't know if that's worth it. That's definitely not worth it. You know? So it's a bit situational in my opinion. If you can make it work. The way to mitigate situational cards is by creating consistent situations where that card is live, right? So if you can make a deck to build around this card, like maybe you play like a Will-O-Wisp 2 1/1s with Ward, or I don't know, maybe you just play a Swarm Light deck where, you know, this Healing Light card would possibly do really well. Like you play Pyramid Wardens, you play Skeleton Heavies, you play High Thaumaturge, Bright Mage into the Veteran Hoplites, all that good stuff, right? It could possibly work. Do I think this card is game breaking? Quite frankly, no. I think there are better options. I mean, Radiant Dawn is an option, right? But I mean, this card recurves very nicely into Radiant Dawn. But I don't know. There's that Benediction card. Benediction. That could be a card worth looking into. But it is situational as well, because your minions do need to be like 2. I think they need to have 2 strength, something like that. But I don't know. Definitely, if you're running a budget deck or a free-to-play deck and you need a cheap option to buff your minions at 4 mana, you can play that card. But I mean, I don't know. Why would you play this card over the 4 mana 2/4 that gives all your minions 2 health? Yeah, that's just something to think about. But I thought going over this card would be an interesting thought experiment, because we don't really get to go over like the favor mechanic a lot in Gods Unchained and how that affects card value. So I thought it was cool to dissect. Anyways, is it worth? We'll see. Maybe I'm not perfect. I can't. Maybe there's some crazy random deck in the metagame that makes this card work. Experience tells me no, but you know, maybe there's that like 1% deck that makes this work. Who knows? Cool. End rant. We're going to move on to the magic cards. Next up, for our magic card, we have Mana Auditor. This is 6 mana 4/4 Aether. If you're holding an Aether, remove 2 mana locks. One of the reasons why I like this card is you remove 2 mana locks for the price of 1 card. And in ramp decks, that's really important, right? Because 2 mana locks for 3 mana is pretty standard, actually, because Mana Toad is 3 mana, Crystal Watcher is 3 mana, although Crystal Watcher can unlock you multiple mana locks for following turns if your opponent doesn't answer it. Sip of Elixir is 2 mana, but it's a spell with no body. So for a 6 mana 4/4 body that unlocks 2 mana locks, this is pretty worth it as a card. It's pretty efficient, right? And the added effect is, I mean, it buys you time as a ramp deck because it gives you, unlocks the next part of your deck, 7 mana card. And that's very good. The ideal curve for this type of deck would probably be like a Sip of Elixir on turn 2 into a Mana Toad Crystal Watcher along with a 1 mana card removal or draw, whatever you want. From there, you ramp. That gets you to 5.5, and then you save your Bag of Tricks. Play the Bag of Tricks, play the Mana Auditor. That gets you to 7 mana. Inversely, you can play the Bag of Tricks on the first turn. So you could be turn 1 Bag of Tricks, play Sip of Elixir. Sip of Elixir gets you 3 mana. 3 mana gets you the Mana Toad or the Gate of the Guardians or the Crystal Watcher. That'll get you to 5 mana. But then you have to kind of get creative, right? Equivalent exchange can get you there. That's part of the reason why I like equivalent exchange as well, because although you do have to pay 2 cards to obliterate or as a cost, it buys you more time. Like for 3 mana, you unlock 2 mana crystals, right? And that's effectively double of what Mana Toad does. Of course, you're paying that cost, but if you're building your deck around having a lot of 5 mana cost minions by turn 5 or by turn 3, something like that, early game, then you can mitigate that drawback because you have stronger draws because your deck is built around, this 5 cost kind of like breakpoint. I digress. That's too much like ramp science to go into it, but for the most part, I like this card. It's really easy to proc. I mean, Polyhymnia is an Aether, and hey, it goes well in ramp decks. So there are a lot of expensive Aethers out there as well. So this card can definitely see play in ramp. Maybe it becomes part of the ramp metagame. Who knows? I think it can for sure. Cool. Next up, we have Compost Charm. This is your 2 mana heal your god for 10 if you have 8 cards in your void and a random nature card to your hand. All right, yeah, so this card is good. Judging based on Just a Nibble, right, which is this very similar card. It was a 2 mana heal your god for 7 and deal 1 damage to one of your creatures, right? That card got nerfed to 5, so when I look at this card, I'm like, wow, this is a lot of value. 2 mana, heal your god for 10. Not only that, instead of dealing 1 damage to one of your minions, you get to replace this card if you have 8 cards in your void with a random nature card. So it replaces itself, heals for 10. This card will definitely see play in control nature variant decks. Maybe you can even see play in mid-range. The other thing it has going for it, it's a Genesis card and it's an epic. And when we look at Genesis set epics, most of the playable ones are very expensive. just something to throw out there. Anyways, we do see a buyout happen. 18 copies were bought at an average price of 0.024 ETH, and that's roughly $73.42. Current price is $86.89. Interesting. Okay, next up for our nature cards, we have Frenzied Ritual. This is your 4 mana. Deal 12 damage to a random enemy creature and a random friendly creature. Add a random nature card to your hand. So the drawback is really easy to play around, right? You just play this card when you don't have a creature. It's a free 12 damage. Like, I mean, of course you're paying 4 mana, but the card replaces itself. So you play this card, deal 12 damage to whatever creature you want. Not whatever, but a random enemy creature. And then you get a card to replace the card that you just played. And that's pretty good. It's very efficient removal. And the drawback is easy to play around. So 166 copies were bought. An average price of 93 cents, big ballin'. And we do see it hit like this 135 mark, which is very interesting. But Frenzied Ritual is a good card. Control Nature is definitely a solid archetype in this metagame. Cool. So moving on to our war cards. So next up we have Strength in Numbers. This is add 4 random war creatures to your hand, give 2/2 to them, 7 mana. This is a great refill button for your control war deck or even your mid-range war deck, to be honest. This could probably see play in Aggroed Frenzy War like a later curve. That could be an option. But for the most part, this card is good. And there's a reason why it hasn't gone down since January, right? Because, I mean, it's just value. For 7 mana, you get 4 random war creatures, and they get buffed 2/2. So any creatures that you get will most likely be above their mana line. In top deck situations, this is great because it gets you out of top decking. In like control situations, you can get like a really crazy threat. Like there's so many busted war minions out there. You can get a Valka, you can get an Odie, you can get an Odin, you can get a Herdicus, you can get a Aeneas. Like so many good minions from this war pool. Even like a Tavern Brawler, right? You get a 2 mana 4/5. Yeah, that's with Blitz. Oh, baby, that's crazy. Yeah, there's a reason why this card has been steadily climbing in price, and I wanted to highlight that. It's a very good card. Okay, so next up, this card just saw recent activity. It's Reinforcements. It's a 3 mana. Basically, it's 3 mana, draw 2, and the 2 cards that you draw will always be 2 or less. So it has some potential to be a refill button for lower curve war decks, but it's also a draw 2 for control decks, right? In the early game, you're not really playing much for control, so you can play this card to get more resources. Maybe it nets you a Tavern Brawler, maybe it nets you a Leviathan Hunter, or a Master Tactician. There are a lot of options for this card, and I could totally see it seeing play. It's very splashable. We haven't really seen it in the metagame as of late, but it's a very good card in my opinion. You get a lot of value out of it. Cool. And finally, we have Raisin. This is our only neutral minion we'll be going over today. I wanted to highlight this because it did see a buyout at around 65 copies at around $2. Let me just make sure. Yeah, $2. Do I think this card is worth $2? Probably not, right? There's some synergy here with that one nether card that gets a bonus by how many nether cards are in your deck. There's some synergy there. Is that going to be worth it? Probably not, because you're inherently making your deck weaker by playing this card. Why are you making your deck weaker by playing this card? Well, you're shuffling 2 random nethers into your deck, and you don't get to choose what nethers you play. It's not like Jason where you kind of get to delve, and even Jason is starting to not see play because it makes your draws worse inherently. But that's for another topic. This card is worse than Jason because you're not doing legendary creatures. You're doing nethers, right? And this could be anything from, I don't know, I don't know. There's just so many like weak nethers, but they're also strong nethers. So I don't want to discount that. Like If you high roll, your high roll will probably be like a Deuteria or a Demo Gorgon. You know what I mean? Or something of that sort. If you low roll, you probably end up with like the 1 mana 1/1 with armor, something like that. You know, so, and it makes your deck worse because it's adding 2 cards into your deck, therefore decreasing the probability of you drawing the cards you need. End of story. But yeah, I digress. I mean, I personally don't like the card, but obviously someone out there does. I'm definitely to each his own, right? And who knows? I could be dead wrong. This card could be totally busted, and wow, it could give you a Demogorgon every time. I don't know. But there might be some implication of use for this. Who knows? But yeah, experience tells me no, but maybe I'm wrong. It's always healthy to have a mindset where you don't assume you're right all the time, right? So that's me, and that's Raisin. That's our neutral minions, and that's pretty much it for today, y'all. Thanks for tuning in. Really appreciate all the support that these market watches have been getting, even just the YouTube channel. Yeah, it really means a lot. As far as what's in the pipeline right now, I'm still on the way to do the core set refresh review. Pineapple Pie, if you're watching, shout out to you, man. Yeah, we're getting it done, bro. But I also want to continue the Understanding series. I've been working on that. Yeah, I mean, updates on how I've been doing with the tournaments. So I'm officially eliminated from the Crypto Cujo and the Infinite Mana tourneys, unfortunately. But I mean, it was a great first experience for my first 2 Gods Unchained tourneys. For the Crypto Cujo, I ended at top 16, which is super nice. I lost to a very good opponent. I definitely could have gone farther in both of them, which makes it sting a little bit. And they're very close matches. I wish I got to record the last couple of games, but unfortunately, something happened with like my streaming OBS program. So, but for the most part, they're really good games, and we have a couple of VODs that I definitely want to review. I already looked at some of them already, and yeah, they're definitely definitely a good learning experience to go over. So I hope that to provide that sort of value to anyone who's interested in competing in Gods Unchained tourneys in the future. Yeah, so I hope to do that. So we have a couple of those in the pipeline. The only thing is so my thing about posting content is I could totally post every day, but I don't know if they will be like quality posts, and I want to make sure that I'm sustaining a good level of quality for my viewers, right? Because quality over quantity at the end of the day. Like, I can be, posting every day, and it could be some, me playing Bored by Death or me memeing, but for the most part, I want to make sure that I'm providing some sort of value to y'all, and whether that be entertainment, education, or just like someone to listen to, I don't know. But yeah, I digress. This video has gone on for way too long. Thank y'all for tuning in. Hope y'all have a great night, afternoon, morning, whenever you're watching this, and see y'all next time. Peace.